A2IM, the collective voice of independent music.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Richard James Burgess, President and CEO of A2IM, and today I'm talking with Kris Ahrend, CEO of the Mechanical Licensing Collective, or MLC as it's more commonly known. Welcome, Kris, and thank you for taking the time out of your very busy schedule. You were named as CEO of the MLC in January this year. Perhaps you could give us a bit of an outline of your background and how your amazing career path led to this job.
It certainly wasn't scripted from the beginning, Richard. That I can say with certainty. Well, I think it's always helpful to start by saying that, like so many of your members, I began as a musician, as a kid playing music and playing in bands, and aspiring to write songs and record music, and that was my first passion. But as many of us often realize, at least for me, doing that for a living wasn't in the cards, but I was able to make my way into the music industry after some time through a channel that's familiar to many, and that was as a lawyer. So I started my career working as a lawyer in New York, joined Sony Music at a time when Sony's law department was sort of an in-house law firm for the entire company. And the importance of that is that it allowed me to do work in every area of Sony's business, including publishing. So as a young lawyer, I worked on co-publishing deals, sub-publishing deals, administration deals, as well as record deals, distribution deals, and at that time, very, very nascent digital deals. And that really gave me a very broad overview of the industry. After leaving the law department, I spent a number of years then working in business and legal affairs, both at Sony and Warner Music, doing deals on the record side, but at some point saw an opportunity to move away from that part of the business and the label side of the business and get into administration and the operation side of the business. And my reason for doing that was really simple, and it was one that I felt very passionate about. And that was that after years of dealing directly with artists, I came to realize how important a key promise we make to them, and that is to pay them properly. So many people in our industry focus on the creative aspects of the business for good reason, but that second promise, as I like to refer to it, is a really important promise. And that led me to get involved in helping to lead the areas of our business that involve paying artists. And that was a really wonderful preparation for me to take this role at the MLC, which, as you know, is 100% focused on paying creators and their partners, in this case, songwriters, composers, lyricists, and music publishers.
I love that two promises concept. You mentioned that to me before, and I was struck by it. And I always think I've heard everything, but I've never heard that before. And I think it's great. I'm so happy that you're there because you're passionate about paying people. And that's probably the more, I don't know, creativity is difficult too, but getting paid is pretty tough sometimes in our business.
Digital has certainly made the creative easier in some ways, and it's made the payment harder. But yes, it's important regardless of how you sort that out.
So for people that may not be so familiar with the purpose of the MLC, would you explain that and the connection with the Music Modernization Act just briefly? I know a lot of people know it intimately, but some do not. So.
Sure. At a very high level, the MLC arises from the Music Modernization Act that was finally passed in 2018. And our purpose is to act as a central clearinghouse for the clearance and administration of mechanical licenses for digital audio services, so streaming and downloads. And in that way, it's important to distinguish we will not be involved in performance royalties or the administration of those royalties, and we will also not be involved in administering mechanical licenses for physical formats, CDs, tapes, vinyl, and the like. We're very focused and limited to focusing on those digital audio uses. But of course, as you know, that is now the largest part of our business, and it's certainly the part of our business that has driven the amazing growth and opportunity in our business over the last few years. So it's an extremely important revenue stream for writers and publishers, and it's the one that we will focus on improving.
Absolutely. So I know, as the MMA was winding its way through, the tortuous path that it went through to get to completion, there was a lot of debate about the structure of the MLC, and it's wound up being kind of unique. Would you tell us about that?
Sure. We are governed by a board of directors that consists entirely of the stakeholders we will serve. There are self-administered songwriters on the board. There are independent publishers, and then there are representatives of some of the large publishing companies. But it was very intentional on part of the group that pitched our organization to be the MLC under the law. It was very important for them to have broad representation of that stakeholder group. And what I love about that is it really brings home the idea that we are a service organization and we are governed by the people we serve. So that connection, I think, is very important and it's very powerful.
I couldn't agree with you more. When you arrived in January, there was, I think, one employee, right? And you've done a huge amount so far this year. So where are you at this point?
Yeah, that's another fun part of the story. The MLC is really a startup, like so many others, and I know that that concept will resonate for so many of your members who are extraordinarily entrepreneurial. But the first 5 months, 4 months now since I've been in the organization has really been about starting up a company. As you said, I was employee number 2. Richard Thompson, our esteemed CIO and extraordinarily talented colleague, was employee number 1. And since January, we have now grown to it's either 19 or 20 today. I think we're on the cusp of signing our 20th employee. So just the process of hiring or identifying and then filling 20 roles or 18 roles after Richard and I has been a huge amount of work, but incredibly exciting. We're building a team of really talented people, some of whom have great experience in the industry, others of whom come from other industries and who will bring great experience to bear on areas where I think we can do better. And within the industry side, we have folks with real diverse experiences. We have folks who've worked at big companies and folks who've worked on the entrepreneurial side, the indie side. So we've got a real diverse and talented team of people thus far, and there's more still to come.
And all in the middle of a pandemic, right? Which,
yeah.
Of course, made everything much easier.
Yes, though I have to say, if you're one to look for silver linings for our organization, the timing of the pandemic was about as good as it could have been, because we had the first 3 months of the year to really set up the foundational things we needed to begin hiring and growing an organization. Things like getting payroll and benefits set up and getting our books set up. And yet from March on, we were able to make a shift to remote working very easily and very quickly because we didn't have many people on board. Most of our employees have joined us since we made that shift to remote. So I can only imagine for so many of your organizations, that shift was more challenging because they had to transition all of their people from the way they were working to this new way of working. For us, most of us, this is the only way we've known.
I think that's a very good point. And honestly, it's all over the map with our organizations, but I think everybody was finally grateful for the fact that our industry is pretty digital at this point, and it made the transition much easier. So, I mean, you've got a dizzying schedule, January 2021, right? That's the legal start date. So
yes,
what progress do you expect? Obviously, you're not going to have the whole thing baked by January 21, but what do you expect? Where do you expect to be in January?
Sure. Well, January 2021 is the what's known in the statute as the license availability date. So that's the date on which we have to begin to make those blanket licenses available to any digital service that wishes to take advantage of them. And we will meet that date. We will be on time. Between then and now, our primary focus outside of building the organization is completing the development and then rolling out the user portal that will allow all of our users to connect to the database that we will maintain, containing all of that musical works data and then the associated sound recording data that we receive from the digital services. And we are expecting to roll that portal out next quarter, third quarter of the year, so well in advance of January. And that will allow us to begin to allow our users to engage with the data directly, to see what data we have, and then to begin to improve the data and correct the data where needed. And the hope is that folks will be able to begin that process before January. But of course, once we begin in January, that's just the first part of the process, because we then have to receive the usage files from the DSPs. We have to process those and then begin paying out royalties. And our first royalty payments won't go out till later in the spring. So there's a lot that will happen before January and a lot that will happen after. And something I talk about a lot with our team is that January, in many respects, is really the starting line for the race that we're going to begin to run, and that race never ends. So everything up until January is about getting ready to run, and then from January on is when we begin doing the real work of the organization, which is, again, administering that blanket license and then ultimately paying our stakeholders, many of whom are also your members. So we are excited to begin paying you all next year in 2021.
Everybody's always excited to get money, so that will that will definitely resonate with our members. So there was some chatter from the Copyright Office about shifting deadlines. Is that where does that stand? Is that advantageous to you? Is it likely to happen?
Yeah, my perspective on that is it was not specific to us, and it had more to do with the Copyright Office needing to have flexibility to manage a host of their responsibilities that go well beyond the MLC. And given all of the challenges of the pandemic, that certainly makes sense. But from our perspective, operationally, we are not changing our timeline in any way. There's no need to do that as of now, and I don't foresee a need. So I want to emphasize clearly for all of your members, we remain on track to begin operating in January of 2021, and that's the full story for us.
Excellent. Well, thank you. So given that January 21 is the starting point for the race, and given that it will go on forever, which is a beautiful thing, how long do you think it will take before you're fully operational, if there is such a thing as fully operational? I know everything's always growing and in a state of flux, but at what point would you say, okay, we're there, we're up and running?
Yeah, later that spring, we'll do our first statement cycle. So I certainly say by the end of next spring, we'll be fully operational, and that we'll be issuing those blanket licenses and we'll be paying people. And what continues forever is both the process and the improvement of the process, and in particular the data. And that, I think, is one of the really powerful concepts here. Nothing about data is static. Data is constantly changing, and in particular in our industry, where we are essentially creating new works, new recordings all the time. Every one of those represents a new data point. So the race that never ends is really about continuing to compile the data that relates to the products that your members and other companies and creators put out into the world. And we never stop doing that because, of course, your members and your creators never stop creating. And that's, of course, the intent. So beyond that, too, the data itself, we always want to make sure the data is better and better. And rights change from time to time. Issues arise. Whatever changes, we want to make sure the data is as current and as accurate as possible. And that's something that all of us will play a part in. One of the wonderful things about the MLC is the data will be publicly available. Think about today, if you get paid by somebody, do you have the ability to look into their database that they use to pay you and to see your data and then to correct your own data? In most instances, the answer is no. But for us, you'll have that ability to look at the data, to see how it was set up, to make corrections if it needs to be corrected, and that will then directly influence how you're paid. So that's a really powerful opportunity, and one that, again, folks will want to continue to take advantage of for as long as they're in business, because it will always tie back to getting paid properly.
I think that's the dream, really, to be able to fix your data. A number of times over the years, you look into databases and see your data wrong. As you know, I'm an artist and a writer as well, and it's amazing how difficult it is to get wrong information corrected.
And I think that's the point. You don't have to depend on someone who doesn't know your works and your business. You have the ability now to correct that, and that's going to be very powerful.
Very true. But then again, there's an authentication issue there. So how do you intend to deal with that? Because that's obviously someone else could go in and change the data and change payment.
Absolutely. And by no means do I want to suggest that anybody can go in the database and change anything they want. The database will allow people to see the data, to make claims or corrections where they think things need to be corrected. And then, of course, if that impacts the rights of someone else in the system, then the system will essentially bring that to light, and it will still be up to the people involved to work those things out. So as an example, we have a disputes and overclaims committee. It's an advisory committee to the board, but the purpose of the committee is not to decide who's right. It's to frame the policies that will allow us to identify where those conflicts exist, make sure that you as the user understand that there's a conflict, and then allow you to resolve that. So again, we're not here to pick winners where there are disputes. We're here to help you see those disputes as clearly as possible so that you can then work them out.
Right, and how much of this will be automated and how much of it will be manual? I know that's a difficult thing to quantify, but I've got to imagine that this has got to be a scalable system. It's got to be pretty automated, right?
Many aspects of behind the scene will be automated, but from a user interface, you'll have the ability to go in and do things at a minimum track by track. And over time, what we will be able to do is add functionality that helps to automate the way that people need to use the system to accomplish certain ends. So for example, if you were buying or selling a catalog and you wanted to change the ownership of a large number of works, we want to find ways over time to allow that to happen via a bulk mechanism, as opposed to requiring a buyer and a seller to change those data points one at a time, of course. So there are lots of things like that that we'll be able to do. But again, we start with the beginning, and the beginning is assembling the data, letting people look at the data, and begin to work on the quality of the data. And then from there, we continue to make improvements and add things forever, in the same way that any other software company does it, right? You wouldn't expect your operating system to remain static for years, and likewise, we don't expect our portal to remain static either.
No, I mean, you have a huge advantage in that you're building this thing in the 21st century. You're not dealing with 19th century legacy systems.
There will be no black screens with green font.
It's frightening that they still exist, but they do. Independents are always concerned that systems are egalitarian. Smaller entities are sometimes excluded because of lack of resources, or because the systems were built unconsciously by people who are trained at big companies. They just don't necessarily understand the needs of smaller companies. Are you building in safeguards for the independents? And when I say independents, I mean the entire gamut, all the way from the self-publishing songwriter all the way up to larger independent labels that have publishing work.
Well, certainly, yes. But I want to start by saying, not because I think I have that perspective, and I think it's important to note, I did not spend a lot of time in the independent sector, so by no means do I pretend to be the expert there. But by hiring people who have worked in the independent sector, and by relying on our board and our advisory committees, many of the members of which come from the independent sector, including the chair of our board, we're going to make sure that we have that perspective. And fundamentally, the portal is really designed for that smallest user. It's designed to allow someone to log on individually and to look at works themselves. It's not built on the assumption that the primary users will interface via a system connection. Obviously, the biggest companies will do that, but the portal is designed in a very personal way to be an individual user interface. So I think that alone shows the how we have designed this for the independent sector, and certainly the self-administered writers as much as anybody. And then by being here today, I hope that your members see that we recognize the importance of them, and you are important stakeholders of ours. So by beginning this dialogue so early on, and then continuing it, coming back and listening to the needs of your members, hopefully we can ensure that we remain responsive to your members. They are incredibly important to us, and we don't prefer certain stakeholders over others. We're looking at all of you.
And I mean, you've borne that out again and again and again by talking to me. And I remember the first time we met, you jammed me in between a meeting and getting to the plane. And you've definitely demonstrated that you care about the independence, and we appreciate that. Will there be a cost to registering?
Nope.
No cost.
the full administration of the collective under the law is borne by the digital services that secure the blanket licenses, and that is another great aspect of the law from the perspective of creators and publishers. Most collective management organizations, I think probably most in the world, essentially cover their administrative costs through a fee that's taken out of the royalty stream. But in our case, that fee is covered separately by those digital services. So 100% of the money that we receive for royalties will ultimately be passed through to creators and publishers, period. We don't take any costs off the top, and there's no fee to gain access to be paid.
That's really great. Do you envisage that this system will surface new money? I mean, like, will it clear out some of the black box monies, or is there, you think it's likely to produce a extra revenue that we would not have had otherwise?
Absolutely, in two ways. One of the obligations under the law is for the digital services to pay us any historic unmatched activity that they still have on their books, so that we can run it through our processes and then pass that money through to the creators and publishers to whom it belongs. And again, we pass through 100% of that money. We don't take any fees off the top. So we will be working on that immediately and probably for a number of years, because our goal is to make sure that we can connect as much of that as possible to the right people. And that's really important. And then beyond that because we will be essentially collecting monies paid under a blanket license, 100% of those monies will get paid to us in the first instance. There will be no similar amounts held back. And then for us, if we're not able to match the activity, that unmatched activity will be available to be searched by any user on our end, and also to some degree by the public, so that if there is unmatched activity, you can search for any that might relate to your works and ultimately claim it in order to be paid. So in that way, we are both designed in a way that ensures we'll get all the money, and then we're also building the functionality through that claiming portal to allow all of our users to see the money we can't connect and to try to make those connections for themselves. And that is another way that we will improve the system. It hopefully will minimize the number of leaks in the process and give every creator a chance to get paid. And I want to emphasize one more part of that, because I think it's so important. This is really where, again, this idea of shared responsibility comes into play, or as we like to say, playing your part. For anyone that's worried about whether they were paid everything they should, they'll have the ability to look in the portal both to see if all of the data for their works is there, reflected accurately, and then to look in the unclaimed portal to see if there's any activity that they've missed. And in that way, each user, each payee has an ability to ensure they are paid properly, right? Because ultimately, that's really what people care about. They want to know, did I get paid 100% of what I need? And you will be in the position to do things to make sure that you are paid 100% of what you deserve.
That's really great. Thank you. We're coming to the end now, and I wondered if there's anything that would be helpful to you that our members could do now, or any other advice you'd like to give to the independent sector, just in wrapping up.
Sure. I think certainly spreading the word about the MLC and understanding what it will and will not do is a great first step for you and your members. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to cover that today. The MLC, as you said, has been an idea for a long time, but it's only now becoming a real entity with living, breathing people who are setting out to fulfill that very important mission. But beyond that, again, as we approach the beginning of the rollout of the portal, I think anything that you can do to get a handle on your data and begin to look at your data, so that when you can see what we have in the portal, you're prepared to supplement, correct, clean up the data. That's important. And then you can also go to our website, which is www.themlc.com, and begin looking at the website for information that we'll post there. And also you can sign up for updates if you'd like. And that way we can keep in touch. But the registration process won't begin until a little later, toward the end of the summer, the fall. So between now and then, it's really about getting informed and beginning to get your data in order.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule.
It's my pleasure. And this is a key part of what we have to do, is make sure that folks know what we're here to do, how it will benefit them, and how they can connect with us. So thank you for the time, and I look forward to working further with you, Richard, and all of your members as we continue to build the MLC.